Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody watching this webinar. And for all of you all who have joined us live, thank you so much for joining. This is webinar 2 of the Thought Leader Experience by EduMates. My name is Arpit Bhaskarwar, the co-founder and COO of EduMates, and I'm going to be the host for you all this evening. For my second thought leader, I have someone who not only wants to make a positive change in a lot of lives, but also wants to empower people around her, people in her team to do the same. And I think that's a beautiful way to put what entrepreneurship really means. She graduated from NYU doing a course of journalism and environmental studies, and now has admits from Harvard, Oxford, and a lot of other universities to name some. She's the proud founder and CEO of an NGO with more than 1,000 volunteers since the launch 5 years ago, and also a co-founder of a platform which helps students with their applications for abroad universities. Please help me welcome Arya Divse. Arya, thank you so much for joining.
Hi everyone, and thank you for having me, Arpit. No, it's great that you guys are doing this. I think it's a great opportunity for us to not just share our work, but also for it's a great way for us to connect with people and just talk to people interested in similar fields, looking to step into the world of social entrepreneurship. It's something that's upcoming new, especially in Pune. So just happy to be here.
Great, thanks, Arya. So, you want to quickly introduce yourself for us, for everyone?
Sure. So my name's Arya Divse. I think you were right. I did my undergraduate at New York University. I have a double major in journalism and environmental studies. I then worked for a year at a law firm in New York, and then I worked as an AIF Clinton Fellow in India for another year. I'm also the founder and CEO of a nonprofit called Jazz Hands Foundation. We're based in Pune. And recently, I just launched my latest venture with my co-founder, Anushka Desai, and it's called Application Ally, where, helping students, just like you and me, apply abroad, understand the process, approach it with a lot more confidence. So that's pretty much my bio in short.
Great, thank you so much, Arya. So now, obviously, we are in a stage where we have been to university now, but a lot of students are in a phase where they want to go to university. I would like to hear about your whole journey of getting into NYU. Talk to us about what preparations that you had to do and stuff like that.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, to be very honest, like what I know about the application process right now versus, what I knew back then is that, can you hear like my phone ringing for some reason?
No.
Sorry. Okay, I was getting a notification. But anyway, so, what I knew about the application process back then was very minimal. And I did my schooling at St. Joseph's. I then went to an international boarding school in Kodaikanal called Kodaikanal International School. I did the IB there. And then I was applying to NYU. So just a limited understanding of what the system looked like. I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I was targeting mostly liberal arts universities, which kind of gave me scope to explore. I love NYU had a great liberal arts program, but also it's based in New York, one of the best cities in the world. That itself gives you an opportunity to explore. I just knew it wouldn't tie me down to anything. So that was kind of my thinking while applying. I applied to multiple programs. USC was on my list, Hamilton was on my list, and I just my immediate support system was my school counselor, because they are well versed in these sort of admissions, but also just my parents and their support. But I realized that a lot of it was just trial and error and testing out and seeing what works, which is not the best strategy to go into, because it's just one shot. You just have one shot to get it right and to understand everything. And when you go to university, you think back and you're like, oh, I wish I did this differently or that differently. Or I wished I changed something, and I wish I reached out to more people. And then you're just like, oh, maybe I would be in a very different position had I known this before. which was kind of the idea behind Application Ally. It's like we need to have a holistic system that is student-centered and student-centric to help people through those applications. But it was daunting when I applied, but it's a major learning process, and people always look at applications in the most like, oh, I'm so scared of this, and I don't even want to touch it, and I wish someone comes in and just takes it away from me and handles all of it. But I think for me, I love the application process. I think it helps you reflect a lot on who you are as a person, what you've done so far, whether your trajectory makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, what the tie is, why have you chosen to do these activities? And I think that reflection is really important for anyone going to undergrad or grad programs. So, I think there needs to be a shift in mindset as to how we look at these applications in the first place.
Right. Absolutely. Great. Thanks for that, Arya. So did you feel that there was a culture change? Did you get a culture shock? Me, myself, being an international student, I definitely did. I took around half to 1 year of my freshers to get over that. Did you feel the same?
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. For me, I think one benefit was that homesickness element was just not there for me. I didn't feel very homesick only because I was in boarding school for a couple of years before going. So I was used to staying away from home. And also even within India, right? We talk about culture shocks, when we move abroad, etc. But even within India, there's a lot of culture shock when you move to a different state. And for me, that's more than anything, because I feel like some states predominantly have very dominant languages. So when I moved to Kodaikanal, the dominant language was Tamil, right? Obviously, in my international school bubble, I never had to use it, but still the culture is different. So my culture shock, I think, happened during boarding school. But IB really prepped me to meet people who thought differently, were from a different religious background, different sexual orientation, people from all over different nations, all over the world. And I think I took that to NYU, so I wasn't frazzled when I met new people. And I love the way NYU structures their experience. I know that in the UK, as well as in some US universities, you do have the option to live off campus, but in NYU you didn't have that option. For the first year you had to live on campus, and you were assigned roommates. You couldn't pick. For me, that worked out great because my roommate was from Turkey, which is amazing. I knew nothing about Turkey going in. I was this ignorant child, just knew my little bubble, and I was stuck with Celine. And then my roommates, my suite mate was from the US. I had another suite mate from Karachi, Pakistan. So, and now that I think about it, this is my friend circle. These are my best friends. So I can say that my best friend is from Pakistan, my best friend's from Turkey. Just exposed to so many different cultures and religions, and I loved that. It wasn't a culture shock. It was definitely it was more so that I had to find myself, but also fit myself in this salad bowl that New York is. Another reason why maybe I didn't have a culture shock in New York is because New York in itself doesn't have an inherent culture. Because it's like I said, it's a salad bowl, right? It's so many people coming in from so many different places, so many different locations, so many different cultures that there's no one dominant culture. So, no one has to fit in. Everyone's just adding to this diversity that already exists. So those were personal circumstances, though I know a lot of people have a culture shock, but I think culture shocks are important. I think they're needed more than anything. They make you stop, they make you reflect, they make you think about where you stand, and they really change the way you think. So that was my kind of experience with NYU.
Okay, great. And you mentioned you were an IB after 10th. Do you suggest students after 10th to do that? How important do you think that is?
For me, it was, I think, life-changing, to be very honest. More than NYU, I think for me, the life-changing experience was the International Baccalaureate program. For those who don't know on this call what the IB is, it's basically, it's the International Baccalaureate, which is a separate diploma that you get, which you can pursue in the 11th and 12th grade. And there's multiple schools that have licenses now to administer it. But the idea is that the IB education, the IB curriculum is more holistic. So, if you are someone like me who doesn't want to pick, and now the situation is probably, hopefully going to be different given the new education policy. I mean, it is more structured to be slightly different. But obviously, for things to be implemented well and come into place, it's going to be still, I want to say, 2-3 years before that settles in, right? But before that, people considering going into like high school, I would 100% recommend it, because if you're someone like me who doesn't know whether to pick science, arts, or commerce, you have no idea what you want to do in life. I think that's the best way to explore yourself, because the IB doesn't develop subject expertise. The IB develops competencies, which is essentially that you take one subject from the science, one subject from maths, one language, but then you have 3 whole subjects to explore. And this can be like, across all disciplines. It could be the humanities, it could be the arts. So I took history, but I also took film, I took Hindi, I took math, I took environmental studies. So for me, I think it was really important, subject wise, but also in terms of writing. I think writing skills I've developed right now, and the reason why I wasn't on the back foot when I went to NYU, like I didn't have to like learn, or I didn't have to spend a semester adjusting to that style, is because the IB just taught me what good writing is in terms of international assignments, in terms of how you put your thoughts out coherently, how you present. So I loved it. I think it's a curriculum that accommodates everyone, and the only issue with it is that like it's not accessible to everyone. I think there's limited schools with it. It's also really expensive, which it really shouldn't be. So those are certain limitations, but other than that, like it's a great program.
Okay, great. Thanks for that, Arya. So you mentioned obviously IB did make a big change in your life. How much of a big difference did NYU make?
Like a lot. I mean, NYU was a place where I really found myself and what I wanted to do. And I think the way it's structured and where it's located was key to that. I went into school just not knowing. I kind of vaguely knew I wanted to do something related to film. I was like, I'm applying to film. But then when I got there, I realized that I don't want to be making creative films. I very soon realized that I was making films geared towards social issues and things that mattered to me. Like I made films regarding the New York subway system and like this program for upcoming artists. I made films regarding this environmental data drive, and soon realized that my focus was more on highlighting issues of importance. And so I quickly realized I was journalism and not creative filmmaking. And the program gave me the flexibility to double major, to like switch, to declare my major in my 3rd year. So that was great. I was able to like academically explore all these things. But more than that, like I think one great thing about NYU is that beyond academics, there's a whole world which is like the remaining 50% of your experience. And for me, that was like almost 80% of my experience. Going in, I auditioned my first year for the mock trial team in NYU. Mock trial is huge in America, and it's like, there's a whole national system for it. Every school has a team. You compete on a regional level, a state level, a national level. There's a lot of funding for this activity, but understandably, it's very competitive. So NYU's program ranked 3rd when I went there. So understandably, very, very competitive. I didn't know the legal system there. So I didn't get in the first year because they only take 7 people out of over like 600, 700 auditions. So I really worked hard my 2nd year, and I understood that system. I practiced and I participated and I got in. So the remaining of my NYU years has been all mock trial. I used to travel every weekend. I traveled all over the country, competed with Harvard, Yale, Berkeley, Columbia. Like that was amazing. And I really honed my skills as an upcoming, possibly a future attorney. So I then got really interested in law and policy. And then I was like, maybe that's where I should be. And so in addition to that, I was also taking a lot, like I was attending all these social entrepreneurship meets, and that's where the idea of Jazz Hands kind of came in. And eventually I won a social entrepreneurship competition at NYU, which then they like funded me to start Jazz Hands in Pune. So without NYU, Jazz Hands wouldn't exist. So like going back to your question about like how important it was, I think career-wise, like the most important thing. I wouldn't change a thing about my NYU experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what we're trying to do at EduMates. We understand the importance of selecting that one university. Loughborough for me has changed my life completely. And I think that's what we want to help all students make that one choice. So great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that, Arya.
Yeah, no worries,
So,
of course.
quick question, top thing on your bucket list right now?
On my bucket list
Yeah.
to get out of home
Yeah.
and travel anywhere.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
no, I mean, like, in terms of silly things, like that was one thing I really wanted to do when I went to NYU. I was like, I'm going to attend a Miley concert. I'm going to attend a Miley
Yeah.
concert, and it never ended up
Okay.
happening. So in
Yeah.
terms of one
Yeah.
of those celebrity bucket list things, I definitely
Yeah.
want to attend a Miley
Yeah.
concert once I'm there.
Okay.
But yeah,
Yeah.
nothing crazy, to be very honest.
Yeah.
Just I want to get through the year,
Yeah.
and hopefully not a lot has changed post that. So
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks for that, Arya. So, the big question of the webinar and what everybody's waiting for. Uh,
mhm.
Tell us about Jazz Hands to start off with. How did it start? How is it unique from other NGOs? We would love to hear that.
Sure. So Jazz Hands, just technically it's a non-profit company in Pune, and
Yeah.
we teach underprivileged students English using drama. So we're like a creative arts-based company, and like we really believe in empowering communities and bridging the student gap using the creative arts. The idea came from just like when I was in NYU, I knew that I had evolved as a person mainly because of these opportunities available to me outside of academics. So that was drama, that was music, that was like my friend circle, and like it was mainly these opportunities that helped me even meet new people and talk to new people. So I knew that if I wanted to do something back home, I wanted to do it in the creative arts, because I really feel that that sector is completely underfunded and we don't value it as much as we obviously value our science fields. So that's kind of the thought behind it. And the idea was that, initially we thought that fine, once a week people will go and like teach English using drama. And like, that was the initial thought. But when we started it, and this is what surprises me even today, is that we had
Mm.
over 80 volunteers for our pilot, which is why we
Wow.
kind of decided to take it off. Yeah, we had 80
Mm-hmm.
volunteers who showed up every single day for
Yeah.
3 hours to teach the students, English, and to like help them put together drama production. And we actually worked with a school that when we went, like that when we approached, they had one teacher for 4 grades. So you can
Wow.
imagine, like,
Okay.
that is ridiculous. Like,
Mm-hmm.
she couldn't be in 3 classrooms at the same time. So they were
Yeah.
completely understaffed, completely underfunded. And this was a great time for us to step in and take responsibility and make something. And
Yeah.
in 2 months, we were able to build the self-confidence up of these kids so much that it was crazy. But for me, the biggest takeaway was that, like, I think this tag that youth have in India is very, acha, if you want to change so much, then do something. Or
Yeah.
acha, like, what are you even doing? Like, all you guys do is go to college, go get drunk, and like do nothing
Yeah.
with your lives. And
Yeah.
like that's, I think, the like then you start believing these things and you start thinking
Oh
that, yeah,
yeah.
we're all like this and we're all this. But
Yeah.
it's so not true. I mean,
Yeah.
I know so many amazing people
Mm.
who have given like more than 7 to 8 hours per week to jazz. And
Wow.
that's kind of what I saw. Like, for to me, that opened my eyes, and I was like, this
Yeah.
volunteering thing is something that's so untapped in the nation,
Yeah.
that's what I want to do. And like it's so crazy that like 80 people stuck together, we worked for 2 months, people loved it.
Yeah.
And then I was like, should we take this ahead? And so I put out these forms and I was like, I really want to make this bigger and I want to solidify this.
Mm.
So would
Mm.
anyone be interested in, like, taking this ahead? From the volunteers who
Yeah.
had already participated. And
Mm-hmm.
we had like 15 people going like, oh, we want to take this ahead, we want to take this ahead. And then we
Mm-hmm.
shortlisted people, and then that's my board right now. It's like, it's
Wow.
like,
Okay.
Nirmal, Anushka,
Yeah.
Ria, Charlene, like that is my board.
Yeah.
And they
Yeah.
kind of make Jazz Hands. And personally, that's my family, right? Those are my best friends. We built a
Absolutely.
company over 5 years, and that bond that you share is something that is very hard to explain.
Yeah.
And then along the way, like, I mean, I bet both of us were discussing this like before this, webinar. And like I was telling you that, you went to Orchid, and to me that's like, okay, great, like I can already tell the kind of person he's going to be, because I feel like certain schools in Pune do a great job of already inculcating values of giving and just service beyond oneself. And I think Orchid is one of those schools that does a fabulous job. So every year we have about at least 20% of our volunteer base is from Orchid. And in fact, our associates, Agrama and Siddharth, who you know really well, have been with us for 5 years. They've stuck with the organization, and this is completely unpaid, right? Like to give that level of commitment and time to an organization and the kids is something that to me is very, very heartening. And now we've worked with over 2,000 students we've taught over 2,000 kids over 5 years. And our kids are able to hold conversations in English. They practice on their own. They sit and try to speak on their own. They've done at least 10 shows so far. So someone who doesn't know the language going up on stage and performing in front of a crowd of 200 to 300 is crazy. So these kids have developed that confidence, and it's because of all these student volunteers coming in to teach them. And we've had over this year, I mean in the past 2 months itself, we've had 200 new volunteers, but overall now we work with 900 student volunteers from all over Pune. So
that's crazy.
It's it makes me really happy, and I always get super overwhelmed, because I'm like, wow, I think about my time, people from St. Joseph's wouldn't even talk to people from Bishops or St. Mary's. And we always had these weird circles and these weird divides that should never exist, And now I feel like, oh, hey, I know you. And how do we all know each other? Because we work towards the common cause. So to me, that's incredible. And each one of my volunteers inspires me every single day, because they give so much to this organization. It's been a major journey, and there's a lot of takeaways in terms of education and education policy. But just in terms of bridging gaps, bringing people together, there's been a lot of takeaways on that end as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed that, Arya. And it's mind-blowing when you see, when you start something and you actually see that taking effect 5 years down the line, right? It's amazing. And you talked about networking and, meeting so many people. I think that's, for me, is entrepreneurship. That's what I always say.
For sure.
Entrepreneurship, the main takeaway is you get to meet so many people. And those relationships are really something you cherish for your whole life.
Definitely.
So great. Thank you so much for that. Quickly, Application Ally as well. I'm very curious.
Yes. So Application Ally, I started with actually Anushka is on the board of Jazz Hands as well. We've done Jazz Hands for 5 years, and then we did Application Ally as well, and we launched it in April. Now the thought behind Application Ally had been something that had been at the back of my mind and her mind for a couple of years, because I'll tell you one thing. It's I see this a lot in Pune. I don't obviously this is even worse in other states, and especially metropolitan cities, is I see a lot of huge consultancies that exist, and we all know who these consultancies are. And then I saw a lot of my friends kind of approach these consultancies for help regarding applications, and it became very obvious that the choices being presented to them in terms of the colleges they should apply to, the process, were purely driven by motives to fill out certain seats in colleges so that the agency gets a cut. So that's where you inherently lose, complete value in your application. If I am someone who belongs at, NYU, I'm suddenly settling for a college that is probably not one matching my interest, probably isn't culturally a great fit for me, isn't something that is going to push me ahead in what I want to do, purely because these consultancies have agency ties. So that to me is very concerning, because then at the end of the day, it becomes a money-making kind of game, and just that. It doesn't money-making is totally okay. As an entrepreneur, you need to make money to sustain yourself. But your product should have value that moves beyond that. It should have a strong value system. It should have a strong base. It should have a strong goal. And I think that doesn't exist in consultancies today. So I wanted to start something where, I can really help students who are in a position like me get into colleges. But colleges that are great for them, colleges that if a client comes to me tomorrow and says, hey, I want to apply to Harvard, I'm not going to say, no, don't do that. Let me suggest these colleges that are probably not so great for you, only because I know I'll get money from it. Right? I think that's horrible. Obviously, if the student isn't cut out, or if I feel like they'd be a better fit elsewhere, I'm going to consult them for that. But other than that, I want them to do well. I want them to succeed. And so Anushka and I started this with the aim that we want to give very personalized guidance to people applying for undergraduate and graduate programs. And by personalized guidance, I mean we work one-on-one with our per client. Like we give 100 hours per client in our consultancy, which is why we work with a limited number of people so that we can give that time. But the goal is that at the end of the process, they feel like this is their application, not an essay written by someone else, not someone else's application pushed forward as theirs. Like this is their application, they're happy with it, and they're confident about getting into their dream programs. That's been the idea. And I think just for me personally, last year has been a very crazy application cycle. So I applied, to like 12 colleges, and I had been planning to attend those colleges for like 5 years prior. So I had 5 years worth of planning going into that, and I got into all my dream programs. So, Harvard has always been a dream. It's always been something that I have thought about since, 8th grade. And suddenly that, when that becomes a reality, you're like, okay, fine. All this work that I've done to get towards it should also be accessible to others. So that's kind of where Application Allies work ethic and philosophy also comes from, is from work that we've already done in the past 5 years. So we understand the relevance of it, and we want to give it out to people and make that available to people, and support them through it as well. So that's been Application Ally. It's I think all my work revolves around youth and students and helping students. And I love it because I get to meet so many cool people doing amazing things. And networking with all of them.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Adi. I think, it's a famous saying that, people buy why you do and not what you do. So I think this fits here perfectly. EduMates also started the same way. We were all the co-founders are international students, and we thought that if we had an opportunity to talk to someone like you, who's from NYU, and if I wanted to go to NYU, it will be a perfect conversation to have with you, to ask you things like stupid questions like, how's the food there? Do you get Indian food there? And that really makes a difference.
It does. It definitely does. I see it. I think all of our clients, one of the first things that we do is we do Alumni Connect, and we connect them with someone from the uni, because I always tell them that what is published on the website of a university is only 10% of what your experience is going to be, maybe not even that. Absolutely. Right? Everything matters, from hey, where am I going to get my food, to hey, does this professor teach this kind of subject, to hey, where can I do my laundry, what's the procedure, to hey, where's the rent better, everything matters. And you need to talk to people that are at uni. You cannot talk to people who've never been to uni. You cannot rely on websites. So it's really cool what you guys are doing. I'm sure we should also work sometime in the future to really, we'd love to help, enlist you guys to connect some of our clients with people studying in the UK.
Absolutely, that sounds interesting. Super exciting. Yes, sir. So obviously, I have a question from someone asking, as a woman, which difficulties did you face, reaching that level of leadership, or that? So just talk us through the difficulties.
Sure. Obviously, I just want to preface this by saying that, to be very honest, I I think everyone in my friend circle, almost all of us, come from a privileged background because we've gotten to study. Like, I think that is the first barrier that a woman faces, is that do you even get to study? The fact that I've gotten to study, I've gone to an international school, I've gone to study abroad, shows that I'm already kind of like, those were initially weren't barriers that I ever faced. And I'm so thankful for that and privileged for that, right? And I understand that. But when you start a business, it's a completely different story. I think it's tough for people to take you seriously in the beginning when you're kind of starting out, because especially when you're young, it's also not just that you're a woman, but also you're young. When we started Jazz Hands, I was 19. So, when we're like talking to funders and we're talking to CEOs of companies who are going to like fund Jazz Hands, you're talking to people who've been in the industry for ages, usually male. That's probably the leaning, and like it's like they don't take you seriously. They automatically are like, it's this 19-year-old girl running it. Like I have so many people call me girl, and like I'm just it's so condescending and irritating. And it's like, no. There is something that I bring to the company, and there is some kind of experience coming in. So you just have to deal with it, and you just have to push through it, because people who at the end of the day are amazing and value that, because there's definitely a different perspective that I bring as a woman. And I think there's definitely like something that adds to my company rather than takes away. So I need to own that, and I need to invest in people who also own that and are happy about that. I have so many male volunteers who are brilliant, who are great, and I also have so many women volunteers who are great. But because of Jazz Hands, I've just seen that like maybe seeing me do Jazz Hands, like I've just seen so many women take such leadership roles in my organization. Even like with my associates, like one of my associates is Agrama, and she's someone who's taken crazy leadership capacities. Like from my fellows, there's always an imbalance. We always have more women than men, coming in. So like, it's not to say that like, I don't want a 50-50 balance. I obviously do, but for me, that's a plus. That's a positive, because otherwise that wouldn't be there. And I think that having like having that leadership matters. Even in Application Ally, we have an imbalance of women clients over male clients. And again, like the hurdles that you face is automatically there's a condescension that comes in. Like, okay, it's run, like 2 of my consultants are women. I don't think they're going to be able to guide me with this subject. And this usually comes with clients who are applying for business or clients who are applying for engineering. And for me, that's ridiculous, because my entire life has been about business, So if anything, that should be a plus. But I know that is stuck in your mind because of a gender misconception. So we usually have like a lot of women clients. We also have a lot of male clients, but it's definitely a 60-40 split. But I don't mind that at all, because at the end of the day, like as a woman in a position of power, it is also my role to let other women be in positions of powers and push other women to be in positions of power. And if I have more women clients, amazing, I can help those women clients. If I have male clients, great. Like I don't take that too seriously. I don't sort of sit brooding about the hurdles that I face, but I'm always aware of it, and I always try to break that cycle within my own organizations. So yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Ari. I think I'm getting inspired by you right now after listening to all these questions.
That's so sweet.
Great. So I have a few quick questions. What is the best piece of advice you've gotten till now? If you had to answer in like one sentence.
I think the best piece of advice was by this woman called Anjali Gopalan. She is a very big figure in a nonprofit that works towards the rights of the LGBTQ community. And I think something she said during one of our AIF Clinton Fellowship panel discussions was the question she got was like, how do you keep yourself motivated? And I think like that's like in a field that is so like, it's so dampening, it's so stressful, it's so crazy. And I'm not talking about entrepreneurship, I'm not talking about business, I'm talking about Jazz Hands. And I'm talking about the social field. And I think this is something that so many people in the developmental sector face. And it's because it's really depressing. You work so hard, but you don't see results immediately. 2, you work so hard, but the laws aren't in your favor. You're helping communities and you see struggles on a day-to-day basis, but then you have people in power making policies against those people.
Yeah.
So it's very taxing emotionally to constantly be invested in working towards that and actually feeling like you're making a difference, because it's very easy to be like, no matter what I'm doing, it's not working. Why should I be working in this sector? Right. So, and as a person who starts a nonprofit, and I know a lot of youth now are starting things, which is great.
Yeah.
I think it's important to like, and she told me that the thing is like, everyone says look at the big picture in business. It's like, what's the big picture? What's the big picture? In the developmental sector, ignore the big picture, because the big picture can cripple you. And it's so true, because when I think about it, I'm like, okay, but like, we're only in Pune, we have only so many volunteers, we have only so many kids. What dent are we making in the education system? And automatically it's a spiral, right? And it's like, but how will we impact policy? That will take 20 years. What will I do for 20 years? Like, none of that works, you know. Focus on what you're doing. My job is, I have 2,000 kids I can impact today. I'm going to do a great job at that. That's about it, right? I need to motivate my volunteers today, because yes, we can't see immediate impact now, but we will see it in 5 to 10 years. And you need to focus on today to get there. So ignore the big picture and focus on your next task. And I think that advice applies to me for everything. Forget the big picture. Will my business fail? Maybe, but I will not know till I start it. So what's my next task? I need to make 100 sales calls. Let me focus on that and do that successfully. Then the next task, then the next task. And don't let the big picture cripple you, essentially. But I would give that advice to everyone in any field.
Okay, great. Excuse me. Yeah. Thank you, Arya. I am getting a lot of questions from a lot of people. So, guys, keep the questions coming. I will ask Arya for you all. I've missed my questions. So, thanks for that. So, another quick question, Arya. How do you measure success? For me, if I had to answer that question in one sentence, I would say, before I go to bed, did I achieve whatever I had planned for the day? What is it for you?
Got it. I'm not a big planner. I am a planner in the long term, in the sense that I plan like, okay, in a year I want to be there, and like I have to do everything I can to be there, and I am a big planner that way. But on a daily basis, like I know you also had a question about routine, and like I'll just put this out there. I have no routine whatsoever. I don't like routine because it like doesn't let me be flexible with everything, and I really need to be flexible in terms of what I need to work on, what I need to do. So I think that probably wouldn't like we're different in the sense that like that's probably not how I measure success. But I measure success in terms of am I like do I feel content about where I am right now? Right. And like that's not just financially, that's like more so for me, it's like emotionally, it's like, am I like, do I feel content about my friend circle? Do I feel content about the people I've surrounded myself with? Do I feel content about the decisions, and am I regretful about anything? To me, I think it's very successful. I think like a person is successful if they are able to sit here and say that, hey, I don't have any regrets, and I'm at peace with the decisions I've made, and I'm okay where I am. So like for me, that is definitely a measure of success. Another measure of success for me is just this is, I know, like weird, and it can be like polarizing and everything. It's just for me, it's like whenever I'm in a position where I have options for myself, where I know that I'm not boxed into something. I know tomorrow I can do this, tomorrow I can just choose to do something else. Like for me, that is success again, because you have put yourself in a position where you have these options. Right. So when it comes to university applications, like when I have clients coming in and they're like, I only want to apply to this one university. If they get into that one university, for me, that's not success, because you didn't set yourself up to be okay with that decision, because it's a 50-50 chance. Right. But when you're in a position where you're like, hey, I have these 5 options, I can this, like, then you've done everything to put yourself in a conducive position. To me, that's success, being in a conducive position to make decisions, to evaluate things, not being boxed, not being forced, not being pressured. I think to me that's success. So I always work with that mantra, like, so that's why, like, when stuff like this happens, when tragedy hits, like literally in terms of like even COVID right now, it doesn't affect you as much when you've set yourself up to be flexible and have options. And I think that is success. Like adaptation is success. So yeah, for me it's that.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Arya. I have one last question before we take the questions from the audience. What is that one small piece of advice you would want to give to all the upcoming entrepreneurs and thought leaders as such?
Yeah, I think like there's a lot to consider, but I think
Yeah,
one
yeah,
thing
absolutely.
is, like one major problem that I see with people starting new ventures is like I think there's a lack of reflection on why you're starting something. Are
Yeah,
you
yeah.
starting something for college? Are you starting something to get a job? Are you starting
Mm,
something because you're feeling this in the moment? I
yeah.
think it's important to spend at least a month just reflecting on why you're starting something.
Mm,
Because when you start something, you are then again in a position of power and you have a lot of responsibility. If you're going
yeah,
to be that person who's going to abandon something within 2 months or 4 months, my
yeah.
advice would be don't do it, because at that point so many people are relying on you, so many people are
Mm,
dependent on you, and you're
yeah,
just leaving them. And I
yeah,
saw this, when I started jazz hands, I saw this with so many people. And
yeah.
like I see this even today with so many people, and like even with my clients for that matter, who will be like, I want to do this for my applications, and I'm like, but what about those people that you're serving? What's
Mm,
going to happen to
mm,
them, right? Like what's going to happen to them once you go to college if you're not going to do this?
yeah,
So even with jazz hands, like my whole thing was, if I'm going to be in New York, how are we going to keep serving these kids? Because it's so detrimental for me to start something, go in for a month, help them, and then completely like disappear, right? Like that
mm,
takes a
mm,
huge toll. So
yeah.
until I had a team and until I trusted my team and I knew that my team was going to be able to handle it,
Mm,
I would not have done it. And like now it's been 5 years. We all do different things with our lives. We do multiple
yeah,
things, but we haven't stopped jazz. So
absolutely.
my whole thing with people wanting to start their new organization is amazing. Definitely do it.
Yeah,
But also be so sure that you want to do it and that you're going to
mm,
make it through and like you're going to stick with it no matter
yeah,
what comes by you.
yeah,
Because the first 3 years are going to be hard.
yeah.
So you cannot abandon it and be like, hey, like I achieved success in the first month, okay, cool, tata, bye bye. It doesn't
Mm,
work.
mm, yeah,
Like
yeah,
just stick with it and like make it something big, because I think consistency is something that most entrepreneurs lack.
yeah, yeah,
You have to be consistent. It's okay if your organization doesn't break even. It's okay if your
yeah,
organization doesn't have profits for 3 years. Like
yeah,
stick with it, see where it goes, and of course after a bit you'll know whether it's viable or not, but
yeah,
till then you need to stick with it. So
yeah,
consistency,
yeah,
all entrepreneurs, consistency.
yeah. Great. Thank you so much. And I would like to add to that. I
Yeah.
was recently seeing a masterclass from Sarah Blakely, who is the CEO of
Okay.
Thanks. She
Right.
said 10 years or 15 years, she did not even tell anybody about the idea. So,
Yeah,
and now she's where she is. But
exactly.
I think that's so important. That's such a good
Yeah.
takeaway that you have to be consistent. So great. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
I'm glad it was helpful. Yeah.
Right. So next question. On what basis do you make a decision when it comes to choosing a university? How do you suggest we identify our strengths and ourselves in the existing infrastructure?
Sure. I think great question. So just
Yeah.
to preface this, anyone on this call, who's watching this, if any of you want any advice in terms of how to pick a program, how to go about it, at Application Ally, we offer like a free consult initially. So just feel free to like go to our website, sign up for that. But right, like just to give answer that specific question.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of factors, and the first thing you need to do is make a priority list. And this
Mm.
should not be like, this should be everything should be in the picture. What's your priority, right? And for different people it's different things. I mean, most clients automatically think that, oh, for everyone across the board it's going to be highest ranked program.
Yeah.
Very often we see that the program ranking is like the fourth or fifth priority.
Oh yeah.
Because at the end of the day, we don't all start off in the same place where we all have a money tree growing in our backyard, right?
Yeah.
There's multiple things to consider. One, can you afford it? Is money a factor that matters? Two, location.
Mm.
Three, program rigor. Four, college culture,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Best example of this is I was struggling to pick between NYU and Hamilton. Very different college cultures,
Yeah.
right? Hamilton, very small liberal arts program, 6,000 people at the max for 4 years.
Yeah.
NYU, huge liberal arts, huge program, 9,000 people just in first year. Again, like, Hamilton is in New York State, and NYU is in New York City. So I had to really think about, what am I a city person? Am I a small school person. I've already been in a small school in Cody. Maybe I need a different environment. What job opportunities am I going to have? Hamilton, I'm going to have a lot more individual attention from the professors, but at NYU, I have the UN in my backyard. Right. So make a priority list. If your priority is being in the city, but you also want financial aid, but you also want this, automatically that's going to narrow your list. So we do that with all of our clients. We understand what their priorities are, and then we do the research on our end to kind of help them figure out what the best list of colleges should be for themselves. And in terms of identifying your strengths, I like to do this exercise. We at Application Ally, we have a process that is essentially like, I think our flagship sort of process. It's called the narrative arc. We do this as a part of our writing program, where we sit with the client over multiple sessions and we understand everything that matters to that client, right from like their family background, their values, how their families influence them, to how their school influenced them, what they did in school, to the internships, what value they added, any personal experiences, any harrowing experiences, any happy experiences, anything and everything that matters to the client that has made the client who they are. Then we remove the client outside, like we remove the client from the picture. Then what we do is we see what story makes sense, right? We see, oh my God, like that's crazy. This makes so much sense. It makes so much sense why now he's doing this when this happened in his childhood. And then we kind of build this narrative arc, which we use for your essays. Right. So it's very personal. It's, very, very, I think it's like, that's why no essay can match like each other's. And I think we really bring out the strengths of our client by really understanding their trajectory. And sometimes the best way to do that is for an external person to evaluate your trajectory. If you asked me a year ago, hey, Arya, like, what's your field? What do you want to do? I'd be like, dude, I'm all over the place. I've done journalism. I've done environmental studies. I've done social entrepreneurship. I love music. I don't know what the hell I want to do. But, I sat with a mentor who at NYU, and like they were going through my trajectory and they were like, Arya, like all your work has been in, education and just social reform. So no matter what, that is the kind of, underlying point of background that's taken you somewhere. And then I was like, I don't want to do law. I want to do policy. That's what I've been doing. That's all my work. So it's really nice to have an external person evaluate your strengths. Of course, you should be self-aware and, create a list and have a list of hits. But talking to someone who knows you really well is a great way of identifying your strengths. Hey, Anushka and I always talk about this where I'm like, Anushka, dude, I need to write my resume. What do you think I do well? And she'll be like, you're great at this, you're great at talking to people. This, okay, what do I not do so well? Oh, you're like horrible at like, whatever. There's like 500 things that she lists, right? But it's good to have a relationship with someone who makes you self-aware and helps you through that process.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Arya. And I have a comment by Vineet here. He says that that's a fantastic point about what you mentioned about, consistency. That's very important in business. Along the lines of, accurate diagnosis of the problem. I would like to share this, that, when we started out EduMates, we interviewed around 100 students from across the world, different countries, different universities.
Okay.
That's how we came to the fact that, okay, everybody has this problem of not being comfortable and not knowing answers to some questions.
For sure.
And I feel that's super important, accurate diagnosis.
Definitely.
And great. Thank you so much. I think there are lots more questions. I'm going to take two more, and feel free to, contact Arya and ask all your questions.
I'll definitely at the end of it, I'll just put my email in the chat box. And whoever needs to get in touch with me, whether just personally, if you need advice or college advice or through Application Ally or about jazz, feel free to reach out to me. But go ahead. Sorry.
So this is an interesting question. How do you manage a company in India from the USA?
Oh my team, which is brilliant. I mean, I don't know, like you're from Orchid, so you know people who work with me, and I think you know how hardworking they are and how amazing they are. But I think, like that's the most important thing. If you are not going to be there at a company, you need to surround yourself with people who have the same vision, who will treat your company like their baby, because at the end of the day, that's their baby as well, right? A great way to do that is give them like enough responsibility within the organization and nurture them to make it seem like their baby. Because I mean, Agrama and Sid have been with us for 5 years, and they've held like positions that we held when we started Jazz Hands, right? They've managed all these volunteers on their own. They've held roles from marketing to like, student engagement to like everything. So at the end of the day, when they are spending so much time and sweat into it, it's obviously their baby as well. So I know that when I'm away and like I have like, a team there, I trust this team to be able to make decisions that are great for my company and will keep my company's values at the heart of it.
Yeah.
The other thing is always stay connected. Just because you're away doesn't mean you don't have means to like get connected. And that's a great part about the 21st century and the tech that we have now. Like, we're in the middle of a pandemic, but we're still connecting and classes are still going on and business is still going on, and that's because of technology. So I always did weekly meetings with my team, or like at least monthly meetings, to figure out where we are, where we stood. And so I think that would be my advice to anyone who wants to kind of, shuttle between countries or places.
Yeah, great, thank you. And I think you mentioned a very important point. And this is, I think I was seeing a video from one of the billionaires, and he said, "Show me your friends, and I'll show you your future." I think that's a super powerful statement. So surround yourself with people who are more skillful than you. If you are the most intelligent person in the room, you're in the wrong room. So that's a great takeaway for everybody. I'll take one last question, which I thought was very interesting, and I'm very curious to know. Obviously, everybody knows or everybody learns somehow that how to start a business. There's a business model, canvas, all that. NGO is something which not a lot of people start. How do you start an NGO?
Okay, just before I talk about how to start an NGO, the comment that you made that, at some point you learn about how to start a business. To be honest, even that, I feel like everyone knows how a business operates, and we hear about these big companies and we're like profits and loss and breaking even and everything. As a non-business person, that's still foreign to me. I had no clue about business. Like, I did journalism. I didn't take a single math class after 10th grade, I know nothing about business. So it's very daunting. And I think there's like a major lack of literature out there for people just starting out. Like obviously I talk to people and I'm like, hey, like, what should I do? And they'll be like, yeah, like your investors and this. And I'm like, I don't have investors. Or like, they'll be like, like look at like your record keeping and like your books, and I'm like, dude, I have no idea what you're talking about. Like, I have not done this. So I struggled a lot, to be honest, and going to the nonprofit process, it is a hassle in India, at least. It is a major hassle in terms of administrative things. So that's again going back to my point about consistency. Don't start it unless you're going to put that time and money into it, because like registrations and getting the certificates itself took 3 years. So, the first year when you decide to like register, you need to like obviously have your whole company constitution, and like you need to have 3 boards of directors minimum. So if you're just a sole person going, I want to start an NGO in India, you cannot. And there's different kinds of NGOs. In India, there's a Section 8 company, which comes under the Companies Act. And then there's a trust, which is different. The registration processes are different. And if you look up nonprofits, like all of them are different, right? Like Jazz Hands is a Section 8. It comes under the Companies Act, but trusts are much faster to start up. But the difference is that in trusts, a board of directors or trustees have personal individual liability. But in a company, they don't. Like, the company has liability. So you need to understand these processes and make these decisions. Like, what's better? Should I go for a trust? Should I go for a Section 8? Like, what do we do? So as a board, even we were all super confused. We used to meet in CCD with our like CA and go like, okay, what is this? If you'd be like, what do you want to do? Trust this one. We'd look at each other and be like, we have no idea. Please tell us. Like, like no clue what's going on. And after that, like, it doesn't end there, because after that you need to get this certificate called a 12A certificate, which is essentially gives people who donate to you exemption, from taxes, and then you need to get an ATG certificate, which gives you or the other way around, exemption from taxes.
Yeah.
And fun fact, you can't get foreign funding for 3 years after registering.
Oh wow.
Only register for a certificate called the FCRA after 3 years of your company being being operational. So that's now for us. Like, so it's a lot. It's a hassle for sure. It's definitely much easier to start a private company or a consultancy, which sucks, right? Like, this is what pisses me off. Why is it so easy to start a for-profit company, and why is it so difficult to start a non-profit? At the end of the day, and someone explained this so perfectly. It's like, what's the role of a non-profit in a country? The role of a non-profit is to aid the government. It's called a non-governmental organization. Why isn't it just called another company? It's not just called another company. It's called a non-governmental organization because it's an organization that does the government's work without being under the gambit of the government. So we are doing public service, we're doing public good, and yet it takes us over 3 to 4 years to get to the status that a company gets within a week. So honestly, like, application a la registration is a breeze, right? Like, for us, it's a matter of 2 weeks. It's like PAN card, get a PAN card, like have a deed, and like, that's really easy, but that pisses me off a lot. It's like, automatically the process discourages people from starting the process. If I'm an upcoming entrepreneur, I want to start a non-profit, I go and I'm like, hey, go to my CA and I'm like, tell me what the process is. He'll tell me this process, and I'll be like, dude, I don't want to do this. I will start a for-profit company and donate to non-profits. And that sucks. So great question, whoever starting non-profits, if that's why you're asking me these questions, consider all of this. It's really important. It's not just a great idea. You have to consider all of this.
Great. Thank you so much, Adya. I think we have lots more questions, but I think we just put your email across. And
yes, I did. I've put it in the chat. Feel free to reach out to me, anyone who needs it.
Yeah. Perfect. All right. Just before we end, to all of you who joined and who are live with us right now, thank you so much for joining. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you had a lot of takeaways from this. Before we end, I would like to say to everybody who's live, we have another thought leader coming next week, next Saturday, 9 p.m. same time. So make sure you follow all our social media platforms, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube, everywhere. This video the whole webinar is going to be live, is going to be uploaded on YouTube as well, so we can go through it again. And feel free to get in touch with Arya, myself, about Application Ally, Jazz Hands, EduMates, anything, and we'll be more than happy to help you guys. And lastly, Arya, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Of course.
And that's the whole idea of this webinar, just learning from each other. And
I'm so glad I was helpful, Arpit, and thank you for having me. You guys have been amazing, and I can see your team also engaging quite a bit. And so thank you so much, guys. Great platform, and clearly just the engagement shows me that like y'all are really reaching a lot of people who have some great questions, really want to make a difference in the world. So glad I could be a part of it. So thank you.
Hey, thank you so much, guys. See you next week. Thanks, Arya. Bye.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.